Been hoping to make some time for a really nice, thorough chicken update video. Life has been really full in wonderful ways, and so I just haven't done it. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to make a video. It's going to be a quick, simple update video, but for those folks that are interested in knowing where the chickens are this fall, what's going on, let me offer that up. We'll take a look at some of the composting systems at the moment, where they are, how things are operating and flowing. There's been a couple piles that we've been working with lately, which I'll talk about in a second, but I realized the first thing I need to do is address the needs of our chicken friends, and that is to actually let them out of this darn place. Here come these old ladies. Hopefully folks can keep in mind, at this point what we have is a pretty geriatric flock. They are lovely ladies. The average age of these hens is somewhere between 4 and 6 years old. Most of their feed is food scraps and soaked grain that we're getting for free from our friend's mill, waste wheat and buckwheat that was mixed in a funky way. We've been adding this to the soil, to the pathways non-stop for the last many months. So we actually have this greening up pasture that's happening all through the landscape in here. I'll turn some in a little bit to show how nicely that works. And they can derive huge amounts of nutrient from all the little pill bugs and worms and soil life that grows within this composting system. So even though we're getting extremely low efficiency by holding on to such old hens, we're able to host these sweet old ladies who've done so much niceness for us, and it doesn't feel like a financial or energetic burden. It actually feels somewhat pleasing if I can be patient when I think about it. But if you see hens that look a little haggard or rough around the edges, it could be that they are, but it also could be that they're, the equivalent of like a 90-year-old or a 100-year-old person. Of course, sweet little rooster man, come up with a name for this guy, but that's the tender little rooster. He's still doing a nice job. He crows, but he's not too loud. Keeps an eye on the hens. The ones that don't want him to keep too close an eye, he's easily ejected from the back of a hen, even if they're old. But he's pretty sweet to them. We actually really like this little guy. I wonder if he thinks he's 3 feet tall. The last veggie haul had a huge amount of organic tomatoes, and that's something that the hens really enjoy, and I think it adds a bit more pigment to their eggs, so it's a nice scene for them coming into these cooler months. I think they're a little peeved with me because I decided to make this video instead of doing the normal routine, which is to take the grain that was soaked. This is what Sasha soaked yesterday. Sunflower seed we buy in from a nearby farm. It's not certified organic, but the guy doesn't spray. He's a nice person. We buy our hay for mulch from him as well. But there's sunflower, and then there's the wheat from our friend's mill that wasn't exactly right. Had some weed seeds in it, but that works just fine. We soak it with rainwater. We've got our tank there with a ball valve that goes to a rainwater tank, collecting water off the metal north side of our roof. Really simple system. We'll have to retire this as we get into winter. It's not cold enough yet to need to do so. But this is the foundation of all these sprouts. We basically pour a little here, pour a little there. They eat as much as they can / want. They miss massive amounts. And then we pour some here. Normally two-handed, normally much more elegant. So I'll go through and spread that out actually a little bit better without the camera rolling in a little bit. The oldest hens really prefer the simplicity of soaked grain. And in the winter what we'll do is we'll actually soak this inside and leave it near the wood stove so that it comes out warm. Sometimes we'll actually cook them in the deepest parts of the winter. The bummer with the cooking is they no longer will sprout, and the sprouting is a really, in my mind, critical aspect to the reason for soaking the grain. But we can throw a nice deer bone in a pot with a whole bunch of grain, maybe a little garlic, maybe some other root vegetables that are dinged up from the root cellar, and give them a really simple grain stew. But for now it's soaked grain that can spontaneously sprout. Let's take a look at how that's working. Here's a random spot in the composting pipeline, and you can see that flow of adding food scraps, adding leaves as we can find them, adding weeds, whoop, there we go, adding the seeds that have been soaked, so they're starting to sprout, begets a whole lot of soil life, a whole lot of worms in particular. And we try to cultivate the worms. We try not to let the hens utterly decimate them, but the population of the worms have increased enough that we're not too worried about it now. And so then we've got these piles. It's much more aged compost. Could have left the system, but I think it's better suited as a sprouting bed for the hens. So this really nice old rich compost makes the healthiest sprouts, and the healthiest sprouts attract the biggest worms. It's a neat combo. The food scraps themselves certainly valuable for drawing in red wigglers and supporting their life, but it's something about having nice aged compost, rich, balanced, aged compost with the soaked seeds added to it, and then a little bit of bulk other material that seems to make for really good housing for the worms. Sorry, the wiggles. The hens are finding them right away. There's some caches that are much ropier than this, especially earlier in the composting pipeline. But this is a huge part of keeping these older hens healthy and feeling relaxed. Like you can kind of sense there's no real tension between them. Unlimited sprouts that cost very, very little. Lots of food scraps that cost absolutely nothing. Worms that cost nothing. And it's all generating fertility in a pretty substantial way. Here's an area that happens to have a lot more wood chip and leaves and charcoal from last winter from making charcoal in our wood stove, and that makes the absolute best substrate for sprouting. I mean, that is a nice scene. There isn't that much complexity to it. So you need an inoculant in the form of red wigglers from somewhere. So wherever you are, there's probably an old compost pile that someone has, an really old pile of leaves, old pile of grass clippings, maybe animal manure at a farm where they don't use dewormers. Get yourself started with red wigglers. You can buy them online, but I bet you can find them where you live. Adding them to the landscape, bulking out their habitat with immense amounts of carbon, lots of sticks and debris to keep them a little sheltered from the hens being able to kick them apart, and then building up with food scraps, adding in soaked seeds so that sprouts can start to happen. If you start exploring making charcoal, either in your wood stove or outside biochar in cone pits, whatever that looks like, charcoal is immensely supportive of the worms. It's all very accessible. Could cost you $0 to get this kind of system up and running for sure. We've been collecting leaf bags, but much less than I normally like to, but even still they're around. And so what we're doing is in the walkways, the leaf bags that have the coarsest material. So here someone was cutting miscanthus grass, smaller grasses, but we've laid them down. That kind of creates a mesh that makes it less soupy and gooey where we walk and use a wheelbarrow. And also as a side benefit, seeds that are soaked that fall in between get a better chance to sprout. So coarse bulk material from leaf bags in the walkways has made it so that more sprouting, more green pasture is possible. Normally would not dig this up, but for demonstration purposes, some folks might be interested to see. This is the upper limit of how sprout-laden walkway can be. Huge nutrition in that and a lot of pleasure. And it even smells good. There's a sweetness to it that's really pleasant. Simple, natural, low cost, if not free. A little bit of a better update than I thought I'd have time to do, so hopefully that addresses some questions or feels like a worthwhile amount of update for what's happening with the chickens. Let us know what kind of questions you have that remain after this. I think what I'll try to do is, if there's some time today, we'll do a much more thorough turning. I think the chickens deserve a little bit more thorough of compost moving, and if time allows, we'll record that and have a nice, robust, voiceless chicken TV. Thanks for your patience as we get back up to speed with all this, and hope you are well wherever you are.